Now today we will discuss the rest of the anti-anginal drugs, that is beta blockers. Now I have not put beta blockers in that's only one slide, so only mechanism of action, and we will discuss a few um, points related to beta blockers used in angina. But before that, what kind of beta blockers we would prefer? Will you prefer beta 1 selective or non-selective?
Selective.
Cardioselective.
Yes. Yes, we will prefer beta 1 selective. And because the beta 2 blocking is not required. Actually, we do not require beta 2 blocking for any purpose. So that is why for cardiovascular purpose, beta 1 is good enough, and we will use beta 1 selective only, like metoprolol, bisoprolol, and carvedilol we can use also for angina pectoris. And the same drugs is also very much used for heart failure. The heart failure will be covered from tomorrow. So today we will conclude angina. Next day I will discuss heart failure. So the mechanism, you can understand that basically it acts on heart and it decreases the heart rate. So the decrease in myocardial oxygen consumption and its negative chronotropic effect, that is the negative chronotropic effect particularly during exercise. So basically resting heart rate will not affect mainly. Yes, if you give higher dose, of course it can affect, but mainly the negative chronotropic effect during exercise, by that mechanism it decreases the myocardial oxygen demand, and so the ultimately the exercise tolerance is increased. So patient will do exercise like climbing stairs or any other exercise, but there will be no precipitation of anginal attack. So that is the idea. You have to decrease the myocardial oxygen demand. To some extent it decreases myocardial um, contractility also. So you can see here negative chronotropic effect as well as negative uh, inotropic effect. Chronotropic means decreased heart rate, and inotropic means decreased contractility. Now you have to think about some another effect is that if you decrease the rate, so what will be the length of the diastole? So you know, if heart rate increases, what is the mostly compromised, diastolic time or
Diastole.
yes,
Diastole.
diastole
Diastole.
is mostly compromised. So if you decrease heart rate, what will happen? More time
Diastole prolong.
for diastole, and I think you know that the um, muscle of heart gets blood supply or oxygen supply, that is the perfusion, mainly during diastole. I think you know that. So if you give a drug which will increase the time of diastole, time duration of diastole, so of course it will decrease, it will increase the oxygen perfusion time. So that actually in a separate way it helps also. So both of them taken together, beta blocker is a very good drug in management of stable angina, and it is not only management of stable angina, in acute coronary syndrome also beta blockers are very important drugs unless it is contraindicated. Now what are the contraindications? Someone please tell, what are the contraindications of beta blocker?
Heart block.
Yes, heart block, then
asthma.
yes,
Variant angina.
yes, bronchial asthma, right?
Variant angina.
Exactly, variant angina. So we know there are three different kinds of angina pectoris. One was stable angina, another was unstable angina, and another was vasospastic angina, which is basically the spasm. Basically, the spasm of coronary arteries. So, if you give this beta blocker, it will not help. For that condition, you have to give some calcium channel blockers or nitrates. Otherwise, the condition will not improve. And on the contrary, the condition actually may uh, get worsen also. Second is that if suppose if a group of patient which cardiac reserve is very poor and they are critically dependent, you can see a critically dependent on adrenergic stimulation. So for those patients, if you give the beta blockers, that can cause profound decrease in left ventricular function, so patient may die. So for those, this is stage 4 heart failure, you can say, and we will discuss in the next class also. So for those patients, beta blockers you should avoid. Okay, so these are the main 2 points about contraindications of beta blockers. Now, the implications of beta blockers, this is the drug of choice unless contraindicated. Okay, and if you combine nitrate, now my question is, suppose a patient who is taking beta blocker, the stable angina is not controlled. Now you are thinking about adding a second drug. Suppose you can add nitrate. So what may be the positive point of adding nitrate with beta blocker? You think for maybe 10 seconds and some one of you answer. What is the advantage of giving beta blocker with nitrate?
The preload will decrease.
Preload will decrease. So what will happen?
Oxygen
So
demand will
decrease demand will be decreased also. Decreased heart rate, preload will decrease, so that will match more.
risk of reflex tachycardia will be decreased.
Exactly. So that is very good point. Okay, whoever says this, what is your name? I cannot see you actually.
Kiran Moy.
Oh, Kiran Moy. Yes, very good. So basically, if you give nitrate, what happens? There is vasodilation. So there is reflex tachycardia, you know. So this reflex tachycardia can be, but the drug is there also beta blocker. So that will inhibit the beta blocker, the tachycardia function of nitrate. So the patient will not have that problem. So taken together, they have synergistic action. That is one point. There is another point also where the nitrate is actually helping something what beta blockers is doing. Now that is, for that we will get actually better appreciations if someone can tell that. This one was good answer, very good answer, but that is relatively difficult, more difficult to find. So tell me one disadvantage of beta blocker that can be helped by nitrate. Okay, I am giving you a clue. Okay, I am making a circle.
Beta blockers.
I am making a circle and that will give you a clue. Yes. Now tell me.
During diastole, the perfusion in the cardiac muscle is more. It will less the diastolic time. So during if nitrate, the pericardial artery will dilate.
I am asking that a beta blocker is, so just like the previous answer, the nitrate, there was a problem of tachycardia that was sorted out by beta blocker. So tell me about a problem of beta blocker that should be sorted out by nitrate.
Beta blocker can cause small amount of vasoconstriction that can be sorted out by that.
No. Beta blocker does not cause vasoconstriction. It is beta 1 selective we are talking about. Okay, I am telling you the answer. So suppose if there is more diastole time, so what will happen to end diastolic volume? End diastolic volume
Increased.
increase. So what is about if end diastolic volume increase, what should ideally increase? Increase preload, right?
Yes.
And what is the major mechanism of action of nitrate? Decreasing preload. So
Yes.
basically, nitrates by vasodilation, it decreases preload, which counteracts the bad effect of beta blocker of increasing preload. Okay, so both of them taken together, you can think that they are like jigsaw puzzle. So they are actually helping each other. So that is why if you combine them, it is a good synergism they show. Okay, so I think clear until now.
Yes.
Okay, now I will go to 3 individual drugs, ranolazine, trimetazidine, and nicodandil, which is a potassium channel opener. So if you, again, we go back to that classification, as this classification. So these 3, this one, okay, these 3 and this one, sorry, 4 drugs. So we will now go into this miscellaneous 4 drugs, which are not mainstay of therapy, but if it is not controlled by this calcium channel blocker or CCBs or beta blockers, then we will go to these drugs. Okay, so first of them we will discuss is ranolazine. Now, then I think now how this drug ranolazine acts by inhibiting late sodium channel entry. So if you remember, Can you remember this diagram? Can you understand this? So what is this? This is
Ventricular
phase-
potential.
Yes. So basically, this is the action. This is the potential of cardiac myocytes, mainly myocytes, because in SA node you get a different kind of curve like this. But this part is due to what? Sodium channel entry. I think you remember. This part is due to what? Potassium channel exit, right? Are you getting me? So basically what happens? The depolarization occurs. So there is very fast sodium entry. So that is depolarization is happening. Then after some time, the potassium channel, because there is so much voltage, it has depolarized to some extent. So potassium channels open. So suddenly there is drop of the potential. So potassium channel entry, but it does not drop very quickly because there are calcium channel, right? This calcium channel will open, which will cause inward movement of calcium channel, which will hold this potential for the time being. So this is called, what type of calcium channels are there? There are L type of calcium channel. Now this calcium channel, if after some time they also gets closed and only there is potassium channel opens, which causes ultimately hyperpolarization to some extent. Then ultimately we get another this kind of curve. So this is the thing. Now, except this, there is another channel is also active, which is the INA. Sodium, one kind of sodium channel, which causes this current, this INA type of current. Basically, what happens? It causes increased calcium inside the cell. So now if we see the normal cell, you come here in this diagram, So this late sodium channel, when it opens at the late phase. Okay, that is why it is called late sodium channel. Now this sodium channel, when it opens, there are more sodium is available. This sodium is exchanged with calcium. So this sodium gets out, and this calcium ion which is out, it comes in. So what will happen inside the cell? More calcium. So this sodium channel ultimately causing more calcium inside the cell. Now if there is more calcium, then what happens? Increased contractility. So increased contractility. Now if we can somehow block this late sodium channel, what will happen? There will be less sodium inside the myocardium and less calcium entry also. So that will cause decreased contractility. So that is the effect of ranolazine. So you can see if you give ranolazine, the sodium channel, there is less sodium. Here it is only 3 sodium, you can see. There are so many sodium here. So there is no calcium. Calcium cannot enter the cell at that high amount. So calcium is remaining outside in more amount. Here there was 2 only. So there is ultimate effect is decreased calcium inside the cell. So that will decrease the contractility. So that is the main mechanism of ranolazine. There are some other mechanisms also, like it reduces cardiac fatty acid oxidation and stimulate glucose metabolism. So in angina, especially in ischemia, cardiac ischemia, we see that there is increased fatty acid oxidation inside the cell, as well as glucose metabolism is decreased. This is the problem with ischemia. I will come after in this regard when I discuss the trimetazidine drug also. So that is the problem with ischemia, where there is increased fatty acid oxidation and decreased glucose metabolism. Now this ranolazine causes reduced fatty acid oxidation. Actually, what happens with fatty acid oxidation? You require more oxygen, so that is increases oxygen demand. So if you can inhibit this, and then that will be good for myocardium. It will decrease the oxygen demand. So that is one point. And finally, it has weak beta blocking property also. So that is, to some extent, it can decrease the heart rate. So taken together, all these 3, ranolazine is a good anti-anginal agents. Although it is not a first line drug, but it is a good anti-anginal agent. Okay. Now moving on to the
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, second point, please. Reduce cardiac fatty acid oxidation and
Okay,
stimulate
I will go back to the okay, let me go back. Yeah. Okay. So if you see it, now forget about this trimetazidine part. Okay, you only see this diagram. This diagram you concentrate. So what you can see, there is Krebs cycle, and what Krebs cycle, it's acetyl CoA, right? So you get acetyl CoA, you can get it from fatty acid, you can get it from glucose metabolism also. Okay. So what happens, and it is required for finally ATP production, that you know from biochemistry knowledge. Now what happens in ischemia, there is increased fatty acid oxidation, you can see here, and decreased glucose oxidation. So that happens in ischemia. So if you can somehow decrease the fatty acid oxidation and increase glucose oxidation, that will help the myocardium. Okay, so that is the thing that is established, and this ranolazine has this property. Okay, now I think clear. Now pharmacokinetics, it is metabolized by CYP3A4 and CYP2D6. So you have to be very cautious with all those drugs which can induce metabolism or which can inhibit the metabolism. If the metabolism is inhibited, then ranolazine concentration will increase. So I think you are very well aware of all these things by now. So you have to be careful that the patient, is he taking any drugs which inhibits the metabolism. And adverse drug reaction, it is actually good. The toleration level is not bad. It is well tolerated. And the adverse effect you get is dizziness, headache, nausea, constipation, and some CNS side effects. It is not something major. So that was all about ranolazine. Next drug is ivabradine. Now, all we draw in this figure here, it happens in what tissue? That tissue that propagates, mainly the propagates. So Purkinje fiber, the AV node, this tissue. But the curve is little bit different in case of pacemaker tissues. Like you can say about SA node. So probably in SA node you will see this kind of thing. So what happens? There is no phase 1 or 2. So from phase 4, there is increase of sodium inside the cell. So you can see there is gradually it is going up. So as soon as it reaches the threshold, which is around minus 40 millivolt, these are all knowledge from physiology, cardiovascular physiology. So suddenly there is L type of the thing, everything shoots up, and mainly the calcium channels, L type of calcium channel is important here. It shoots up. You can see here that L type of calcium channel for phase 0. And phase 4, there is a peculiar type of channel which is hyperpolarized activated cyclic nucleotide gated channels, HCN. So you can see the full form here, HCN. So these HCN channels, basically what are they? They are basically sodium channels. Okay, they are basically sodium channels. And there are 4 kinds of HCN channels, HCN 1, 2, 3, and 4. And among them, the peculiar property of this particular HCN channel is that they are also controlled by cyclic AMP. So the cyclic AMP level, if it is increased cyclic AMP, then the sodium channel will open. So, and the sensitivity of cyclic AMP differs between this 1, 2, 3, and 4 type. Like in cardiac cell, this 4 is mostly important, this 4, and which is mostly sensitive for cyclic AMP. So the same reason why this is important, can anyone answer? Why this HCN4, which is most sensitive to cyclic AMP, is present in the cardiac SA node? Common sense. Anyone?
So that in most energy deprived state also the heart can function. Means when
Okay,
ATP is very less.
But what cyclic AMP is increased by which receptor?
Adrenergic receptor.
Yes, beta
Beta
receptor.
1.
Exactly.
Beta.
So that is why the heart is very much sensitive to adrenaline or any other beta 1 agonist. And similarly, it is if you give beta blocker, then beta 1 blocker, then it can get decreased. So basically, here is the problem. The cyclic AMP level is important. So HCN is a typical sodium channel which is responsible for this gradual depolarization during phase 4. And there are some T type of calcium channel also, but HCN is the main channel. Now, if somehow you can inhibit this HCN, what will happen? If you can inhibit this HCN, what will happen? What will happen? Decreased
heart rate.
Decreased automaticity, yes, decreased heart rate. So if you can block HCN, it will decrease heart rate. So this is the mechanism of evaporating. So you can see this is a unique mechanism. It is not like beta blocker. It is acting on the very root of the automaticity. Okay, it is acting on the very root of automaticity without hampering anything. So it does not have any effect on cardiac contractility. It is only acting on the heart rate generation. So that is the mechanism action of ivabradine. It is a selective blocker. It is a selective blocker of HCN channels. Okay. So and this is called IF. So basically it is called funny channel. Okay, funny. So the current ultimately the current is called IF. There is another IH also. IH is also, and remember this IF or this HCN, it is not only present in the heart, it is present in multiple areas inside the CNS, in the retina also it is present. So if you block this IF is the potence, the current it is called IF and the channel is HCN. So if you block the IF, it will decrease the heart rate and it also decrease the other areas. So that is why there is transient enhanced lightness in restricted areas of visual field. So if you give this drug, the ivabradine to the patients, so 5% of cases, the patient can report that there is increased lightness of eye. So very bright, they will see very bright, everything they will see very bright. So because this funny channels is also responsible for the retinal HCN. Okay. So that is the reason you get this kind of adverse effect. Now, drug reactions, you can see that this drug is decreasing heart rate. So any drug which also decreases heart rate will have drug interactions. Pharmacodynamic type of drug interactions it will have. So you will have drug interactions with beta blocker. You will have drug interactions with non-DHP calcium channel blockers like verapamil or diltiazem, especially verapamil. So you should avoid this ivabradine with beta blocker or verapamil. Okay. So whom you can give ivabradine? A patient who is sensitive to beta blocker, you cannot give beta blocker to them. You can give this ivabradine because it will decrease heart rate, but it will do nothing to the other areas of heart or any other B2 related action. So that is one good point of ivabradine. But yes, it is not a first line drug. You have to try the first line drug first. If it is not controlled, then you can go for this kind of drug. Okay. Any confusion till now?
So can you explain the drug interaction with CCBs?
Non-DHP CCBs.
So non-DHP CCB and ivabradine.
What verapamil does? What non-DHP CCBs does? That is the main thing in the yesterday's class, na? You can see cardiac contractility and this is the automaticity. So decreased automaticity, the full potential, 5 out of 5 by verapamil and diltiazem. Okay, and so it will also decrease conduction through AV node. So this is one drug which will decrease the heart rate, and ivabradine will also decrease the heart rate. So if you give them together, what will happen? Bradycardia will happen. Severe bradycardia will happen. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Now we are going to the next drug, which is nicorandil. Okay, nicorandil is basically potassium channel opener. So if we go to yes,
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, this drug is also like beta blockers because both of them decrease the CAMP. So
no, it does not
the person
decrease
which is sensitive
cyclic
to beta blockers would be sensitive to this also, no?
It does not decrease cyclic AMP.
So it blocks the HCN4
It
channel,
blocks
which
the
is
HCN channel. It does not have anything to do with cyclic AMP, because beta blocker also does so many things. It decreases AV conduction. It decreases contractility. So if a person is sensitive to beta blocker, they are probably sensitive to that function also. So the evaporatin, good thing is about evaporatin is that it does not have many property what beta blocker does. Okay. So if you say the efficacy wise, yes, of course, beta blocker should be more efficacious than this evaporatin. But if the person is very much sensitive to beta blocker, probably because due to the AV conduction or due to contractility thing, so you remove the most of the things from beta blocker. Only the HCN part, evaporatin will act. Okay. Okay. Now we are moving on to potassium channel
Thank you.
opener. Yeah. Okay. No problem. So now we are moving on to the potassium channel opener. But before that, again, I am going back to the same slide, which I want that you all know by heart. So this is the calcium channel blocker. You can see. So these are the things that causes vasoconstriction, and on the right, these are the things that causes vasodilation. So if we can open potassium channel, then there will be hyperpolarization that will inhibit the calcium channel entry. So that will decrease the contraction. Now, this is a very straightforward to understand that how nicorandil acts by vasodilation. But the thing is, if we give, it has been shown that if we give simple potassium channel blocker, okay, and we give nicorandil, the effect still it is present. So nicorandil does not have only potassium channel opening property. It has also some effect on cyclic GMP also. Okay. So it is shown that if we give PDE5 inhibitor along with potassium channel opener, it will increase the effect of potassium channel opener. So it is now postulated that potassium channel openers have dual action. One is this nitrate-like action that I showed you. Sorry, the potassium channel opening action that I showed you in the left side, and it has also nitrate-like action, which basically increases cyclic GMP. So basically, it's cyclic GMP mediated action. How it is not known, but it has dual action. It has nitrate-like action and it has potassium channel opening property. So if by nitrate-like action, it decreases preload. Okay, it decreases preload, so decrease oxygen requirement, and also increase to some extent increase coronary blood flow, but it is not very much important. Mainly decreases preload and decrease oxygen requirement. And by potassium channel opening property, it decreases afterload because it decreases contraction. So it is acting left side of that diagram. So it decreases afterload also. So ultimately, finally decreases myocardial oxygen requirement also. Okay. So it has multiple action, the nicorandil. So this is how it acts. Now, adverse drug reaction, you can get a nitrate-like adverse drug reaction, which is hypotension and headache. So these are the adverse drug reaction you will get. And there is another unique adverse drug reaction, which is ulceration. Ulceration, especially in the GI tract. So buccal mucosa as well as GI ulceration. That is a unique adverse effect we see with this nicorandil. Otherwise, most adverse effect, it is the most common adverse effect is hypotension and headache. And this same drug can be used for heart failure also, that I will discuss in the next class. So this was all about this. And now the final drug is trimetazidine. Now how it acts the same way I already told. It increases it decreases fatty acid oxidation. So in ischemia, we get that there is high fatty acid oxidation and low glucose oxidation. This is a problem. This is a change happens to the myocardium when there is ischemia. Trimetazidine acts to reverse the change. Okay, so how it does? It inhibits this enzyme, thiolase. You know that thiolase is an important enzyme for beta oxidation pathway. So it inhibits thiolase. So ultimately, beta fatty acid oxidation gets decreased. So that is its mechanism of action. It is only you cannot give trimetazidine alone. It is basically given when the other drugs is not acting very well, or are not sufficient to control the anginal attack, then we go for this drug. Adverse drug reaction is GI upset, nausea and vomiting, and these are the rare. Okay, these are rare side effects like thrombocytopenia, agranulocytosis, and liver dysfunction. So this was all about trimetazidine. Now these two drugs, these antiplatelet drugs and drugs for dyslipidemia, these are not the classical drugs. If you think about the classical anti-anginal drugs, these are not that kind of drugs, but these are the drugs you should give to almost every patient. So what antiplatelet drugs we use? We use aspirin. And remember, it is low dose aspirin. Okay, high dose aspirin is basically NSAIDs. So we give low dose aspirin. So we can give 75 milligram, we can give 150 milligram, we can give 325 milligram. So this is low dose aspirin. Or if the patient has any contraindication with aspirin, we can give clopidogrel also. We can give clopidogrel. I will discuss antiplatelet drug in detail. And drugs for dyslipidemia, we mainly prefer statins. So it may be rosuvastatin or atorvastatin. So these statins are mainly HMG CoA reductase inhibitor or atorvastatin. So these two drugs you should give to almost all the patients of stable angina. What antiplatelet drug will do? It will inhibit the platelet plaque formation and it will decrease the happening of acute coronary syndrome. So basically it will inhibit myocardial infarction and unstable angina. It decreases acute coronary syndrome. So basically you are giving this for prevention. It decreases acute coronary syndrome. And what statins will do, it will decrease atherosclerosis. So ultimately disease process will decrease. So it will inhibit atherosclerosis. So although these are not classical anti-anginal drugs, but you have to give these drugs to the patient of angina pectoris. Okay. So in
Sir.
this diagram, everything, yes.
Sir, can we add any anti-inflammatory kind of drug? Means since the atherosclerosis or the disease process is actually inflammatory, you told in the first class.
Yes,
It's
good
inflammatory.
question. Yes, good question. Yes, of course it is an inflammatory. So atherosclerosis is now considered as an inflammatory process. But the thing is, it is not that high-grade inflammation so that you can continue these anti-inflammatory drugs. Okay. So drugs like so conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or some other joint pain or so in those conditions like ankylosing spondylitis, those are very highly inflammatory conditions. So to manage pain, you have to give anti-inflammatory drugs. But if you think about a patient who has come, suppose 42 years old and with angina pectoris, stable angina pectoris, so inflammation is not that bad. But if you start anti-inflammatory drugs, so how many days he will continue? Probably the patient survives for 30 years. Suppose he will survive 30 more years. So for 30 years, if you give continuous NSAIDs, so you know the adverse effects of NSAIDs. So what will happen to the patient?
Peptic ulcer disease.
And there are many things. Actually, NSAIDs has its own cardiotoxicity, nephrotoxicity, and other kind of things. So you cannot give drugs like that. Okay. So although there is inflammation, but it is not that high-end inflammation, because inflammation is not the main problem. Okay, the main problem is other risk factors also. So that is why we cannot consider anti-inflammatory agents for that purpose. Okay, so what do we have?
Thank you.
We have these nitrates, we have these calcium channel blockers, and we have two kinds of calcium channel blockers. One is this nifedipine and amlodipine, which is basically CCBs. And other type of drugs are these non-DHP CCBs, which will decrease the myocardial oxygen demand by decreasing heart rate. And we have nitrates, and we have antiplatelet agents. We have this low HDL and LDL, so we can give statins, and of course we have beta blockers. So these are the mainstay of therapy. So everything taken together, we have this slide. Okay. So now this all the way upon now we have discussed. Now how to treat a patient. So let's finish this anti-anginal discussion with a case. So a 45-year-old male patient with history of smoking presented with exertional retrosternal compressing chest pain radiating to left arm, which lasts for 2 to 5 minutes. The pain is relieved after taking rest. So this is a classical case of stable angina. So what you get a patient who has history of smoking, who is a male patient, and whenever the patient do some exercise, he gets chest pain, and as soon as he takes rest, it goes away. So basically, it is very highly suggestive that only from the history you can tell that it is probably cardiac pain and it is probably stable angina. So after proper investigation, he has diagnosed as a case of stable angina pectoris. Now, what may be the investigations? It may be ECG, it may be treadmill test, it may be echocardiography, although echo you will not get very, it is not very investigation of choice, but still you can get some regional wall motion abnormalities. So by these investigations, you get this patient, and you also, what kind of test you should also do to the patient? You should go for the dyslipidemia. Is there any dyslipidemia or not? You should check lipid profile, and you should check the okay, you tell me what other things you can see. What a very, very important thing from the routine test only.
Cardiac markers.
Yes.
Cardiac
CKMB.
markers.
Okay, so look, if you see the patient, is this patient has come with acute chest pain right now?
No, not acute.
No, not acute chest pain. So why you will do cardiac markers? Because if it is acute chest pain, then you will go for acute cardiac markers to differentiate that is there any myocardial infection or not. So for this case, you do not have to, because the patient tells you, the patient is perfectly fine right now, maybe in your chamber. The patient tells the history that whenever I do exercise, like climbing stairs or something, playing with my child, I get the chest pain. So right now the patient does not have anything like that. So you should not do any cardiac markers like TROP-T, TROP-I. It is not required right now. So what biochemical test you can do? You should do. Of course, you should go for lipid profile testing. Lipid profile. And you should always check for the fasting blood sugar, that is diabetes mellitus. Is diabetes mellitus or not? So that is also very important, because you know that one of the major risk factors is dyslipidemia, hyperglycemia, and smoking is the major risk factors for atherosclerosis. Okay, let's so this is the presenting feature, and relevant information is smoking history. So inference is suffering from stable angina pectoris. So that is our conclusion, that the patient is probably suffering from stable angina pectoris. General measures, cessation of smoking. So this is lifestyle modification. By lifestyle modification, you mean, should you tell the patient do not do exercise? No, you should tell the patient that you should do physical exercise, but up to limit. So whatever the limit he should always try to do that. Otherwise, the exercise threshold will decrease as the time goes by. And calorie restricted diet. So these are the general measures he should take. And finally, the actual treatment. So always, for all those patients of stable angina, you should prescribe this drug, glyceryl trinitrate. The patient will not take it regularly, but one tablet sublingually he should take when chest pain appears. Okay, it is not for regular taking the glyceryl trinitrate. It is, he should carry this tablet every time if he goes somewhere during the trip or everything, during office also, he should always keep it. Whenever the chest pain appears, he should take this tablet instantly sublingual route. Okay, it can be repeated up to 3 tablets at 5-minute interval. So that is for acute case. So SOS we can say. Next drugs we can give is to decrease the occurrence of this kind of attack. So we can give metoprolol, 25 milligram, 1 tablet twice daily. So basically you can start from lower dose also. You can start from 12.5 milligram twice daily, because the big term with beta blocker is that start low, go slow. So you have to give, you have to start with a very little dose, then you go up as the patient accommodates the dose. And of course, you should not stop it suddenly. You should always step out of beta blocker before, if you are thinking about withdrawing the drug. Next, you can give amlodipine also. It is a calcium channel blocker you can give. So with these two drugs, you can start with one drug only, then you can go for second drug. If it is not controlled, you can go for that also. But as you are managing this case first time, you can start with one drug or two drugs. But if it is not controlled, which is not written here, what are your options? You can give some long-acting nitrate. These are the other options you can give if it is not controlled. Long-acting nitrate, like isosulfide mononitrate, or maybe glyceryltine nitrate, sustained release form you can give. Second, you have ivabradine, you have ranolazine, and you also have trimetazidine. And also you may require nuclerantil, but most of the cases you do not require this amount of drug. So you start with this. If it is not controlled, you can try increasing the dose of these two, or you can add this from there. But remember, you should not combine ivabradine with metoprolol. Okay, beta blockers you should not combine. And of course, you should give aspirin to prevent acute coronary syndrome, low dose aspirin. And you can start atorvastatin or rosuvastatin. If you are giving atorvastatin, you start with 10. If you are giving rosuvastatin, you can start with 5. So this is how you can manage this case. Okay. So this was all about angina pectoris. And it took 3 classes to complete. I hope you will go through your book. You can go through Tripathi or Goodman-Gilman as you wish, but you must study it as soon as possible. I will send you the PPT, and of course you will get the recording also. And in tomorrow at 11 I will start heart failure. Okay.